Is this good to eat? Watch and see. I'm Shidalu. Wow, in this exciting episode, I'm not just revealing the hidden secrets behind Tainan Beef Soup. We're also going to talk about the major crisis facing Taiwan's beef industry right now. I actually have a message right here from one of the absolute biggest names in Tainan Beef Soup. Dear customers, due to a severe cattle shortage, starting September 14th, one beef wholesaler will take 2 days off each week. It will be closed every Monday and Tuesday. Open as usual on Wednesday. What now? If you go to Tainan on a Tuesday, you won't get any beef soup. If Taiwan runs out of cattle, we'll import them from overseas, from the other side of the world. If that's not enough, then we can import 2,000 head. Hey, not subscribed yet? Now's the time. Go subscribe.
Please.
Please.
One thing I've always wondered is why people in Tainan add rice wine to beef soup. Why not whiskey? Can't I add Jägermeister?
Jägermeister? Sounds like a topic for another channel. Honestly, most Tainan beef soup doesn't have liquor in it, but some places do offer liquor for people to add. I've actually tried it myself before. At some upscale private dinners, guests specifically ask for classic Tainan beef soup, and I know how to make that broth. Mine is definitely more on the herbal side. It has fruits and veggies plus some herbs, so the broth ends up a bit darker. In that case, if you pair it with just a little bit of nice Islay whiskey, specifically an Islay malt, like a Bunnahabhain that's a little fruity or floral, a few drops are actually pretty nice. But something like Jägermeister though? Wow, I'll try it and get back to you.
Okay, now I really want to ask a serious question. Why does Tainan beef soup taste sweeter, fresher, and more tender?
I think the best way to explain it is to look at it from a physiological and timing perspective. That explains it very clearly. After slaughter, the carcass will enter a state of rigor mortis. If you're of a certain age and into crime shows,
I love them.
CSI.
But I'm not old.
Oh, okay. In CSI, you know, that show, Grissom, the lead character in the original Las Vegas series, used that a lot. He'd carefully examine just how far the body's rigor mortis had progressed to estimate the time of death. It's especially useful in criminal cases. It really is. The exact same thing applies to livestock. In large mammals, once rigor mortis sets in, the effects are very obvious. Generally, rigor mortis starts about 3 hours after death, peaks at around 12 hours, and fades by 48 hours. That's actually in humans. With freshly slaughtered beef, however, it takes about 6 to 8 hours to enter rigor mortis. It peaks at 24 hours and starts to release around 48 hours. During that 6 to 8 hour window, it hasn't entered rigor mortis yet. That window is what we call the golden window for freshly slaughtered beef. Back then, they really would. After the slaughter happened over there. Get that cow straight into a cab and take it right over to a Tainan beef soup shop now.
Backseat or trunk?
Backseat, AC on. Strictly speaking, why is rigor mortis so incredibly important? Once cattle are slaughtered and become carcasses, the conversion of ATP to ADP happens gradually. And if that keeps happening in the muscles and it can't be turned back into ATP, then the muscle tissue starts to get stiff and rigid. If there's still plenty of ATP in the muscles before rigor mortis actually sets in, then when you cook it, ATP breaks down. And when it breaks down, it forms something called IMP. IMP may sound technical, but in food science, it really is one of the key compounds behind umami. It's what we call inosine monophosphate. It's also found in high umami seasonings. Now you know why it's called that. It's especially savory, so it tastes sweeter. So what we want is beef from before that 6 to 8 hour rigor window. That's the beef you want. What happens once rigor mortis starts? Once it does, ATP is gone, so the beef loses its sweetness and turns tough. There is even a term for it. The meat has gone back. That means it's entered rigor mortis. Can you still use that cut? Actually, yes. With more time, what we call aging, will it come out of rigor? As I just said, it'll release more tasty umami compounds. But more importantly, enzymes kick in. Those enzymes break the muscle down again. Once the muscle breaks down, there are 2 effects. First, free amino acids are released. Basically, the umami comes back. Second, as the enzymes work, the long fibers break down, so the meat turns tender again. So there are 2 kinds of tenderness. First, before rigor mortis. the Tainan Beef Soup kind. The second comes after rigor mortis and aging. What's that for? That's for steak. If you take properly aged beef and slice it really nice and thin for Tainan beef soup, would it work? I've tried it. It's really sweet and tasty. But one thing you can't recreate is this. With Tainan beef soup, you can use special cuts that steakhouses can't use. When I'm cooking up a steak myself, I wouldn't normally use shank for tender steak or lean rump either, because they're tough and chewy, just for stir-fry. But in Tainan beef soup, before rigor mortis sets in, all those cuts are prime cuts. I got called out by the owner at AU once. He said, "Oh, you do Western food? What's the most tender cut?" I said, "Filet mignon." He said, "Then watch. I'll cut you some." I said, "So tender, your tongue can cut it." Then he cut me a piece of shank, and I swished it for about the same time to the same pink color. And I said, "Wow, how does the shank taste like filet mignon? That's amazing." After aging, though, that doesn't happen. But with freshly slaughtered beef, while it's still warm, that disappearance of fibrousness is actually something quite unique.
So, as I understand it, the real golden window is those 6 to 8 hours after death.
Yeah,
But after 48 hours, it kind of comes back to life.
back from the dead.
Exactly. Before we get back to the cattle part, I want to ask a serious question. If I cross Taiwanese cattle with Australian Wagyu, what should I call the calf?
Well, remember Mendel's crossbreeding experiment? The pea experiments? That's what we call the so-called F1 generation.
You mean like Formula One?
Not the one with Brad Pitt in it. This is actually pretty common in Australia and Japan. For example, in Australia, well-known names include S. Kidman and Icon. Some cross purebred Australian Wagyu with Angus to produce first-generation offspring, which are called F1. In Japan, they typically cross their Japanese black cattle with Holstein dairy cows. The resulting F1 calves are marketed as domestic beef or domestic Wagyu. That's how they market them. They actually produce really palatable beef, and on top of that, they adapt exceptionally well to the environment. This is what people in animal breeding refer to as hybrid vigor. Just as you mentioned, crossing Taiwanese cattle with Australian cattle, there are already some really top leading ones out there. Even the top livestock companies in Taiwan are all doing this already.
Wow, thanks for seriously answering my corny joke.
Actually, it all really started back in the 1970s. The government, acting through the Ministry of Agriculture and also through the Council of Agriculture, they continued the livestock policy in a very, very interesting way. At first, beef cattle weren't really a separate industry. The focus was really much more centered on the dairy industry itself. In other words, milk was really the top priority back then. Think about dairy farming. Dairy farming exists for milk. So what do you raise? Dairy cattle. And we mainly raised Holsteins. In livestock textbooks, Holsteins are dual-purpose cattle for milk and meat. Dairy farming needs cows because they can be milked. But unfortunately, you can't easily decide a calf's exact sex. If a calf is born female, it becomes a dairy cow. But if it's born male, it's raised as beef cattle. So male dairy calves are usually pretty cheap to buy outright because they weren't specially bred for beef. So beef prices in Taiwan were able to remain fairly reasonable and consistently stable overall because calves are born male or female, basically 50-50. But by 2023, just a few years ago, our government had already started actively getting ready in advance for the Taiwan-New Zealand trade deal. In 2024, dairy products would go tariff-free. Milk imported from New Zealand would come in completely duty-free. So they were already worried this would push down Taiwan's milk prices and hurt the dairy industry. I think the government's thinking was very deeply rooted in economics. The demand was still very much there the whole time, but the supply on our side was really, really high. We already had plenty of domestic supply, and now New Zealand's was coming in, so prices were bound to fall. So what did they do? Since the deal was already signed, they had to follow through. What did they do? They deliberately scaled back domestic milk production through what they themselves officially referred to as the Comprehensive Upgrade and Transformation Plan for the Cattle Industry. From 2024 to 2027, they would invest major resources in culling low-yield dairy cows and subsidizing mortality insurance. What that meant, basically, was that if you got rid of cows with low milk yields, the government would pay you financial compensation for them. I recall 20 or 25 grand. And on top of that, even after you've already received the subsidy, you can still go ahead and sell the cow later on as beef. So you got paid again. In theory, though, that had really nothing to do with beef cattle anyway. But think about it. All beef cattle ultimately come from cows. If you cull those cows, then you'll be left with fewer cows to produce the beef calves you need later on. So, in helping dairy farmers, that one single move also ended up badly hurting the beef industry. There was a similar case before, and honestly, it was pretty absurd. Remember the school milk program? In other words, those school children took home 3 or maybe even 4 bottles every single week. And that school milk program, with that one move, didn't just make kids happy. It practically wiped out the goat milk industry. Parents stopped ordering goat milk.
Oh, right.
We used to rely on imported semen for breeding, but now they think that's not enough, so they start importing live cattle. In other words, these cattle are flown in from Australia to Taiwan.
Do they earn miles?
Hard to say whose account gets the miles. Right now in Taiwan, the number of live cattle slaughtered every single year is currently more than 2,000 head. Those companies are probably trying to cover Taiwan's total shortfall with one import plan by bringing in 2,000 head. But 2,000 head is too many for planes, so they ship them by sea. There were rumors before. One industry player told me he'd also asked a few of the government-backed research bodies in Taiwan whether live cattle could be imported at all. They said the death rate was high, over 20% or so. Wow, if it's over 20%, then it wouldn't work, right? But the Meat and Livestock Australia replied. They said that when exporting to Asian countries, the death rate is below 0.1%.
Why is the gap so huge?
That's why I say it's just a rumor. But the real point? 0.1% death rate makes the business viable. So what if it's 2,000 head? Then just bring in 2,002.
Just 2 extra.
Yeah, 2 more. That way, you'll still end up with 2,000 head of healthy, happy cattle. So if shipping by sea can be worked out, the bottleneck now is quarantine capacity. But I wonder whether this could be done through a dedicated facility quarantine. Let's say, hypothetically, a farm says, fine, I'll take it. I'll pay for it. That means clearing out the whole farm and making it compliant. This batch of cattle could go to that farm for quarantine after landing. They'd stay there as long as needed. If it's 30 days, then 30 days. If it's 15, then 15. Whatever the government requires. Since the farm would be isolated, it could serve as a quarantine site. Then once the dedicated quarantine is done, that's handled. But right now, it really seems the government is saying that under the current rules, they simply can't be redistributed afterward. How could they all go to one company?
So does dedicated quarantine mean one company takes them all?
One company takes all. That's strange. Couldn't redistribute then. But if dedicated quarantine is government approved, it should count as a government quarantine site. So redistribution should be possible.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not sure how far along it is now, but from everything I've heard, they really do need government help to actually make this happen. Because we never really had a truly, relatively mature, end-to-end beef cattle supply chain in place. So why not use this chance to build that supply chain? We'd have good breeding stock, and the beef cattle sector now seems pretty united in trying to make this work. If the government is willing to put money into it and help get the whole supply chain fully built up, why can't Taiwan export great beef?
Love beef so much? In on this plan?
We're actually very close to it now. So we want to learn a bit more and see whether we can put together a fuller, more detailed record of the whole thing. If we can go to Australia and get the selection process.
Film the process?
Yeah. Or film the full unloading process at the port, the entire quarantine procedure, and exactly how the cattle are transferred from the ship onto the trucks and transported inland. All of that would be really meaningful.
If we bring this up on the show, would that actually make us the very first in Taiwan to talk about it openly?
If we post early.
Then I'll push for it.
I really think the beef cattle industry is just such a huge topic. I really don't dare draw too firm a conclusion, but I think I can just share one pretty interesting case for reference. Hokkaido once faced a cattle oversupply problem, but it didn't handle it with slaughter subsidies. So what did Hokkaido do? They basically took all of their Holstein cows and bred every single one with Hokkaido Wagyu cattle, producing offspring that are well suited for beef. In Taiwan, some companies have tried something similar. Here's an interesting figure. Did you know that whenever a Holstein dairy cow gives birth to a little bull calf, its value is basically gone? It's only for beef. And these calves usually sell for around 8,000 new Taiwan dollars to 9,000 new Taiwan dollars each. Pick it up in 3 days.
Pick it up in 3 days sounds like a short video clip. Here, take this one. Add to cart.
The reason for that is that caring for calves is actually high risk. But if the calf remains right there, still with its mother for a much longer period of time, I'd say maybe up to 3 weeks or maybe even a month, its survival rate can reach 80 to 90%. Picked up after 3 days, survival's just 40 to 50%, 60% at best. The death rate is high. Do you know how much a cheap calf costs?
No idea.
500 to 1,000.
What I spend on one meal might actually buy a calf. Mom, I want a calf.
How would you even raise it? What I'm saying is, some beef cattle farmers could go straight to dairy farmers. Say one calf. At the high end, it's 9,000 new Taiwan dollars. Let's just call it 10,000 new Taiwan dollars. I'll give you 25,000 new Taiwan dollars. Once the calf is born, keep it with its mother for a full 3 weeks. Then sell it to me once it's stable. That way, you make more. And I can also make sure the calves I get have high survival rates and good quality. It wouldn't be random breeding. It'd be more like bringing in an Angus bull or using Wagyu semen to breed cows, so the calves would turn out well. On the one hand, this helps sustain the beef industry, just like in Hokkaido. On the other hand, those cattle wouldn't need to be culled so soon. They don't just produce dairy calves. They produce beef calves, too.
Could this be a way to give them a side job and help keep the industry alive and going?
Side job to main job.
Yeah.
Strengthening local industry and making it more professional really matters. Look at the steps we just mentioned. Each one takes expertise. We need to treat beef cattle as an industry worth developing. I think livestock specialists should really look into this more, especially within the Forage Livestock Division. That name is kind of cute. How are they giving guidance? Can they look at what other countries do? We already have local examples, so maybe we can follow them. They've already built the model. Then there are live imports. Don't treat it as just a quick fix. It helps in a pinch. More importantly, it brings in good breeding stock. We don't just need good semen, we also need good cattle. That really means importing live cattle. Brands in the supply chain are starting to connect in Taiwan, but more effort is needed. Feed differs from place to place, and that alone could fill several episodes. If we change the feed, say Hokkaido now has technology for grass-fed Wagyu, feed it grass and it still marbles to A4. Taiwan's agriculture and livestock sectors are really fascinating and always changing. So I want to ask, how would you support this industry? One good way is to support it through consumption, and not just Tainan Beef Soup, I think. Taiwan's beef industry really needs you to buy local beef. And finally, on a more personal note, on a selfish note, it's been such a long time since I went back to Tainan for beef soup. Which place do you all normally go to? That famous place with the first pot. Is that very first batch really as rich as people say?
You know, if they shared that below, they would be hunted down by Tainan locals.
The one by my place, right?
Yeah.
If you're interested in Taiwan's agricultural stories, check out our other videos. And if you really enjoyed this video, please comment, like, subscribe, and share. There's also a new feature.
Hype.
Please give us a hype.
Few get it. Tap if you do.
All right. Please and thanks. Thanks.
Yay, thanks.